here's some interesting, actually, reports about the press, actually. Right. So this is Netanyahu. We can go to, this is, A8. Netanyahu, again, this is translated by Google, said Al Jazeera, this is a tweet, harmed Israel's security, actively participated in the October 7th massacre and incited against IDF students, soldiers. It is time to remove the shofar of Hamas from our country. The terrorist channel Al Jazeera will no longer broadcast from Israel. I intend to act immediately in accordance with the new law to stop the channel's activity. Ryan, whatever, I mean, it's true. Al Jazeera is absolutely an arm of the Qatari government. There's no question about it.
It's funded by the Qatari government. Sure.
Right, yeah, right. Absolutely. And that doesn't mean, I mean, actually, I read Al Jazeera a lot throughout this conflict and have found it fairly helpful. It's somewhat interesting that Netanyahu is just now cracking down on Al Jazeera because it kind of gets to what we were just talking about in how Israel wants to sort of maintain the moral high ground and puts a lot of effort into even just naturally the propaganda of maintaining the moral high ground. I can't believe they allowed Al Jazeera actually to operate in Israel this long, to be honest.
Well, Israel wants normal relations with the wealthy Gulf countries.
Yeah.
And so just banning one of the most popular news channels in the world is a step against that. Israel has already basically made it impossible for Western media to operate inside Gaza. Al Jazeera is, to the extent that it is a Western news out in the sense that people in the West are familiar with it. People in the West go on it. It has an office here in Washington, D.C. It's kind of a known quantity in the way that some other kind of Middle Eastern news networks aren't. And so Al Jazeera was really the only well-resourced news outlet that was watched by Westerners in Gaza. And now the Knesset has passed this law, and Netanyahu is saying he's going to enforce it, that's going to ban them. It's not entirely clear how that affects their ability to operate inside Gaza. Al Jazeera reporters do coordinate with the IDF when they're going to go to different areas. Sometimes that coordination has led to them being killed. As the Intercept, we've reported on some of that, and the IDF has then also dragged its feet in allowing kind of rescue personnel to get to in the case of the Al Jazeera cameraman and reporter that died back, I forget,
December.
Back in December. Does this mean that Israel will now consider all Al Jazeera correspondents kind of like fair game in their kill zones in Gaza? I've reached out to Al Jazeera. I don't have an answer back on what they understand the new law's effect to be. But people who have not been following this closely might not realize that Israel, which continues to call itself the only democracy in the Middle East, has some of the has censorship laws that are as aggressive as anywhere in the world. Like you can be arrested for reading different news outlets. Like you can go to jail for reading different Telegram channels, for commenting or liking, or even just being subscribed to a particular channel. Anything, and that's what they describe as kind of terrorist sympathizing or terrorist supporting, but they consider anything basically affiliated with Palestinians to be terrorist sympathizing.
It's absolutely also true that Qatar has housed some Hamas leadership.
Well, they do. That's where the negotiations are happening. Yeah.
Right, but even before, I mean, that you had Hamas leadership.
Yeah, Taliban's there. Like
cushy.
Qatar is like the Switzerland of the Middle East. When there's a crisis, everybody goes to Doha, and the U.S. Begged actually Doha to allow the Taliban, for instance, to have its headquarters there, so that we could negotiate with the Taliban. Like you need somewhere for that to happen. And so Qatar has been the country that's been willing to do that. It also has a base of 10,000 American troops. Yeah. So it's not as if it's like just a nest of terrorists.
It's exactly what we
Well, actually, it is a nest of terrorists, the American ones, yes.
So the Israeli law, interestingly, and again, they're making this argument that Al Jazeera poses a significant threat to state security. And it's just, I don't want to bring TikTok into this, but it does sort of echo some of the conversations about, obviously they're involved in a hot war, and we're sort of involved in a Cold War with China, but yes, cracking down on speech when conflict boils to the surface is, you understand from the perspective of security why, sure, free speech is harmful to security. You obviously have to have red lines.
And to show that this is really not about who's funding it, and it's about what they're saying, we can look at this Channel 13 report that aired yesterday. Absolutely unhinged and hysterical. So if you want to read it, you can read the translation of it here. This is a Hebrew language report about a young reporter named Yunus Tarawi, who, if you are following this conflict, you have probably seen his work. He and others have done absolutely essential work of just following IDF soldiers' TikToks and other social media accounts and finding the evidence of war crimes that they post themselves and then reposting that, but taking it out of the context of them bragging about it to their friends. So they did this long investigative report naming this guy, essentially trying to put a target on his back. And what's amazing about the report, and you can find it on Yunus's Twitter account, is that they don't identify a single fact that he got wrong ever. Like, no, you would think that, okay, because he's done dozens and dozens of these at this point. Most of the ones that you've probably seen, these TikToks of them wearing women's underwear, or blowing up a mosque, or riding around in little bicycles, or grabbing a trophy, or, as the one we just showed, the French national admitting to having just tortured a detainee. Like those are his. You would think that there'd be one case of mistaken identity or something that an entire investigative news outfit at Channel 13 could find to kind of undermine his work. They found nothing. Instead, what they found are IDF soldiers who say that they have been bullied as a result of him posting the evidence of their either war crimes or despicable behavior. Because they quibble a lot with the definition of what a war crime is. Fine. Call the parading around in the panties of a displaced person. Call it despicable. Call it whatever you want.
Right.
And we can play this second part here. Here's the French national complaining. He says complaining that his admission of torture is now causing people to say mean things to him online. I'm being threatened with all sorts of lawsuits and an international court, but I know it's one big BS. They marked my nephew who lives in France and his family because it's easy to turn the hate towards him. Now, I'd say, look, leave his nephew alone, leave his family alone. But this soldier himself, to be complaining that he's now potentially facing prosecution in the International Criminal Court or prosecution back in France because Yunus exposed his admission of torture. And also, all Yunus did is take a public post and share it elsewhere. The French national with the IDF is the one who decided to commit torture and then post about it. Or if he didn't torture the guy, he then lied about having just tortured somebody on his own social media. And so I think what this shows is that, yes, they don't like Al Jazeera, but it's not because of how Al Jazeera is financed. Yunus is not getting Qatar funding. He's just a guy who's good at using social media and has been dedicated in an impressive way to this craft. I've worked with him in the past. We've worked on some stories together. We haven't ended up publishing any yet over at The Intercept. I hope we do. He's done incredible work, and as a journalist, I think we all need to stand by him and condemn this type of Channel 13 threat, unless they've got something. They have nothing. If they said, okay, this reporting was flawed in these ways, then fine. But to say it's unfair that because of Yunus's reporting, the International Criminal Court is looking into this French national, that's your consequences, actions meaning your consequences or whatever.
Yeah, to your point about Al Jazeera, I mean, I think they may genuinely care about the source of funding, but it seems as though the priority here is cracking down basically right on dissent. Like,
Yes, absolutely.
It's a question of, and again, like I said before, like, yes, from a pure security perspective, speech and reporting and journalism is, sure, it's a threat to security, right? That's, what we have, though, are in democracies red lines that protect your ability to speak, even if, so that it doesn't allow for fascist total control of everything. And so, yeah, huge concern. It'll be interesting when John Kirby has to answer questions about that going forward. I think the White House, I think Matt Miller actually said basically they support freedom of the press, and basically the implication was that they don't support cracking down on Al Jazeera from Israel's point.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.